I was once a chariot soldier in Pharaoh's army, on the day we chased Musa's people toward the sea. Years later, one broken wheel remained in my memory, resting by the water like a question Egypt never answered. Before that shore became silent, I believed the thunder of chariots was the sound of order itself in Egypt. Dawn poured gold across the stables, across leather reins, across wooden wheels polished for Pharaoh's command each morning. We were young then, standing beneath his statues, certain Egypt could never bow before any living man on earth. Horses breathed in the morning haze, their heat rising like smoke above the dusty training yard before sunrise. I learned to hear the wheel before seeing the road, because a driver survives by reading the ground. Beyond the stables, Pharaoh's palace shone like the sun, while we remained small gears inside his enormous machine. Even a small gear can feel proud when it belongs to a machine the whole world has learned to fear. Each morning, officers checked our reins, axles, hands, and posture, as if discipline could hold history completely still. On the stone walls, Pharaoh always charged forward, never retreating, never doubting, never afraid of the road ahead. I thought those carvings remembered victory, not that they were warnings carved by men who feared forgetting defeat. Outside the barracks, Hebrew workers passed with lowered shoulders, careful not to meet the eyes of armed guards. We were taught to call them laborers, not fathers, mothers, sons or daughters carrying private grief through Egypt. Back then, I did not understand an empire can fall from a cry it forces into silence for years. An officer entered the yard with dust on his sandals, and every young laugh around the horses died. I believed history belonged to those who commanded, not to those whose footsteps were crushed beneath command every day. He gave one message. The man called Musa, known to many as Moses, had returned to Pharaoh's court. The rumor moved through the stables faster than wind, though none of us understood what it carried into Egypt. I was sent to the palace corridor, where stone columns made every soldier's footsteps feel smaller than whispers. Inside the hall, Pharaoh sat where young soldiers were not meant to stare for longer than a breath. Musa stood before that power without chariots, without an army, with only Harun beside him in fearless words. From the doorway, I heard little, but I saw the guards shift after every stretch of silence inside. People in court were trained to bow before Pharaoh, yet that day they bowed to hide confusion from him. I gripped the leather at my side, wondering how an unarmed man could make stone seem so quiet. The magicians were summoned, their robes dragging across the floor like shadows ordered to answer aloud before Pharaoh. We waited for laughter from the hall, the usual sound when Pharaoh crushed a weaker voice in public. But laughter never came, only whispers moving through the corridor like fire hidden under gray ash, in fear. That night, oil lamps burned longer, and servants walked softly, as if afraid to wake the palace walls. An older guard told me Musa had once lived here, before the desert swallowed his name from court. That story changed the palace, as if the past had found its way back through the royal gate. Pharaoh still commanded as before, but officers lowered their voices whenever the name Musa passed between them at night. To me, the frightening thing was not the threat, but the silence that followed it inside the hall. From that day, every palace door seemed to keep a question no one wanted spoken aloud near Pharaoh. When I left the court, Pharaoh's shadow stretched across the yard longer than it ever had before that day. In the days that followed, Egypt did not collapse. It simply began breathing out of rhythm around us. First came the water, the thing we believed flowed obediently through the hands of ancient gods, forever without question. Jars inside the barracks were guarded, and every soldier drank as if stealing from a forbidden, sacred place. Horses knew nothing of politics, but they understood fear when handlers hesitated beside an empty stone water trough. In the markets, bargaining grew quiet, and people looked at the sky more than the weighing scales below. News of locusts came from the fields, carrying the smell of stripped leaves and sealed royal granaries nearby. Officers told us not to listen to rumors, while they read papyrus orders with exhausted red eyes anyway. Some nights, frogs called from the courtyard until a young soldier's sleep broke into useless, frightened pieces again. We cleaned the axles every morning, yet dust and unease clung to the wheels with equal patience afterward. The Hebrew people no longer looked at us the same. Their fear now carried something harder to name. I did not recognize it as hope until I heard them whisper Musa's name inside mud brick houses. Pharaoh still sat upon his throne, but water jars, grain stores, and stables had begun resisting him quietly. One afternoon, I saw a commander throw his order tablet down, then pick it up in heavy silence. No one in the army said Egypt was weakening. We only said order had to be tightened again. But the tighter order was pulled, the more its cracks appeared in the strain of leather straps everywhere. Sometimes I wondered whether Pharaoh feared the signs, or simply hated that they did not ask his permission. For the first time, a horse cried at night, and I believed it knew what we refused to see. The order to pursue did not arrive like thunder. It came as hurried footsteps through torchlit palace corridors. We were pulled from sleep, each man grabbing reins, each hand checking wheels by shaking firelight in haste. Night made everything more honest. Horse sweat, old wood, scratched bronze, and breath pressed behind our teeth tightly. An officer said Musa's people had left, carrying children, bundles, and a faith we could not measure yet. He did not call it deliverance. He called it Pharaoh's loss, and we understood the rest immediately without speaking. Pharaoh ordered every chariot prepared before sunrise, every horse harnessed, every driver ready for the desert road ahead. I tightened leather around the horses, trying to make my hands steady like morning drills again under pressure. In the torchlight, an older driver checked one wheel 3 times, as if wood might somehow lie to him. No one sang a victory song, only axles turned, and restless hooves scraped the hard ground beneath us. Pharaoh did not need to stand beside us. One command from him moved the entire yard at once. On the papyrus map, the people's path was only a thin line of ink toward open desert roads. Beyond the map, it was children crying, bundles lifted, and frightened feet leaving darkness behind as dawn approached. I climbed into my chariot with faith still intact, because a soldier was never allowed to carry doubt. The driver beside me touched the bronze sign on his chest, then looked toward the opening gate ahead. The barracks gate slid open into night, and cold dust entered as if the desert had waited outside. By night, Pharaoh's army was moving toward the sea, though none of us understood that ending yet at all. We rode beneath dim stars, believing morning would return Pharaoh's honor to the face of Egypt again soon. Behind us, the palace shrank. Ahead, the road felt unlike roads that had carried victories before us safely. At first, there was only dust, thick enough to turn every chariot beside us into moving shadow shapes. The wheels filled my ears, steady and heavy, like a prayer forced into becoming an order allowed by men. We saw footprints in the sand, drag marks from bundles, and the smaller traces of frightened children ahead. Far ahead, the people were only a trembling, dark line beneath the pale desert heat, still moving forward. An officer raised his hand, the formation pressed harder, and horses pulled us into colorless dust ahead together. I once loved that speed, but that day it felt like being dragged by something not mine anymore. On the map, few paths remained. Our ink line pushed everything toward the edge of the sea ahead. They said Musa led them, but from behind I saw only a people refusing to turn back again. Sometimes the wind opened the dust, revealing cloth, old shoulders, and a mother carrying what remained behind her. Then dust closed again, as if the desert would not let us look at their faces directly for long. I heard the sea before I saw it, a sound wider and colder than any battle drumbeat I knew. The front ranks slowed, not from exhaustion, but because the road had reached its final shape before us. The sea appeared under gray light, lying across every promise Pharaoh had ever made about his strength before us. Behind the people were our chariots. Before them was water, and I thought history had trapped them completely. The young soldier I was did not know some traps are not meant for those fleeing from power. Near the shore, even the wheels sounded weaker, as if wood and bronze had begun to doubt themselves. When Musa stood near the water, the whole desert seemed to hold its breath before the unknown ahead. The wind changed before the sea changed, pulling our linen backward like an unseen hand from nowhere at all. The horses stepped back once, then again, though the reins in our hands pulled hard against them helplessly. I saw the water open, not like drunken soldier stories, but like silence being divided in two halves. The people descended between the waters, small and trembling, yet still moving toward a distant, waiting light ahead. No chariot soldier spoke first. We only stared at the emptiness where the sea had been moments before. Pharaoh ordered us forward, and a familiar command sounded strangely distant inside the rising wind around us all. The chariots rushed onto wet sand, wheels throwing water, horses straining, officers shouting to hold formation together desperately. I tried to look ahead, but saw only walls of water, silhouettes, and spears shaking in frightened hands. What terrified me was not the water, but that the chariot no longer obeyed its driver beneath my hands. Wheels slipped, axles screamed, reins tightened, and my faith began leaving my hands with the leather straps slowly. Someone called Pharaoh's name, as if a name could harden the sand beneath our slipping wheels as before. But the sea did not turn back for that name, and the wind did not bow to crowns. I do not know what I begged for, or whom I begged, when the water grew louder around us. I only remember a horse's eye, wide with terror, reflecting gray sky and rising water behind me forever. Then every command broke apart, not in a scream, but in a cold, white emptiness around us all. In that moment, I understood a chariot is powerful only while the ground agrees to remain beneath it. After that, the sound of Egypt vanished, and the world became water, closing over human memory forever afterward. When my memory opens there, the shore no longer resembles a place where an army once stood proudly. No formation remained, no drums, no officers raising their hands through dust and shouting into the empty air. Only gray water touched wet sand, and a broken wheel leaned sideways like something tired, useless, and old. A leather rein drifted near my feet, soft and useless, connecting no man to any strength now at all. I had believed power was wheels, columns, carved names, and Pharaoh's voice echoing through stone halls without end. But that morning, power was something that could not be summoned back after the water had returned to its place. Far beyond the shore, Musa's people continued onward, small as the final ink stroke on a fading map. I do not know how they remembered us, or whether any face behind the chariots remained human to them. I only know I never heard the sea or Pharaoh's name the same way again afterward in life. In the palace, statues may have stood, columns may have risen, and servants may have swept the courts. But a world can lose its soul long before its stone walls begin to fall apart around it. Years later, I still remembered wet leather, broken wood, and the cold water clinging to my wrist for years. I remembered the first morning in the stables, when we believed Egypt could never bow to anyone alive. I remembered Musa from a distance, not as a conquering general, but as someone walking where we could not. And I remembered the sea, which did not argue, rage, hurry, or answer Pharaoh before it closed again. Since then, whenever I hear still water, I hear an old empire stop speaking inside my memory again. If that wheel remains anywhere, it does not tell of war, it tells of the limits of power.